Thank you, and good to be here. Put my water down. So, what I want to talk to you today is about really kind of UX research and design methods, but very much within the context of, and I need to find my clicker, very much within the context of building new products and services. So not something that already exists, where you're trying to optimize something that is already out there in market and that people kind of understand and use and have, experiences with. You're trying to build something completely new and essentially replace and improve on what already exists in market. So that's what we're talking about. And essentially, this whole concept of avoid the fact that you're competing against luck. So how can you improve your odds when you're trying to bring something, a new product or service to market? So that's what today's all about. It's really around research tools and design methods when it's for something that's new. And it's very, very different, and I would argue very, very different set of tools from if you're looking to improve something that already exists. And the essence of this is that customers are only really very good at recommending improvements on what they already know and use. So when you go and talk to somebody about, I don't know, say one of these things, and go, how can I improve this? And if they're used to using this thing, they'll give you really good feedback on how to improve it. They'll tell you to make it lighter, make the clicker easier to use, whatever it is. They'll give you lots of great feedback around this thing. But if I'm asking somebody some feedback on something that doesn't exist today, so a new idea, a new concept, a new product or service, then at that point, they've got no direct user experience of that thing. And what they're essentially doing is giving you their opinion. And it might be a good opinion, but they're essentially giving you their opinion on how to make it better. Now, there's flaws in this approach, and it very much builds on the Henry Ford quote. You'll all know it. This idea, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they'd have told me faster horses. And it's as true now as it was 100 years ago or more when he said it. So just because customers are giving you helpful and constructive feedback, it doesn't mean that you should implement those improvements. Now that sounds hugely counterintuitive. It's like, surely if we're being customer focused and customer driven, if customers are giving feedback on this thing, we should embrace what they're telling us and we should listen to what customers are saying, and et cetera, et cetera. So it feels somewhat counterintuitive to then say, well, in this scenario, when it's around something totally new, you have to be really, really careful. And it's not because they're trying to mislead you. So we've seen lots of situations where something new and an idea has been put in front of customers, and they'll do their absolute best to try and give you some constructive feedback. So they're not trying to mislead you. They're not trying to be unhelpful or give you, kind of any dodgy information. They're trying to be as helpful as they can. But the assumption is, when you listen and take that advice around how to make it better, the assumption is, if I implement those improvements and I improve it on those dimensions, that they will then choose it. They will then, if you get it to do this and if you prove it on these dimensions, I will now choose it above the competing alternatives. And I would argue that's a massive assumption. And the reason is because of this. So there are lots of dimensions around which you can improve something, and you guys will all be very familiar with that. So, whatever it is, you can make things smaller, faster, cheaper, lighter, whatever. There's loads and loads of dimensions around which you can make something better. But I would argue that all improvement dimensions are not equal. And the reason they're not equal is because some of those dimensions and improvement dimensions will actually drive choice. They'll actually be things that will drive them and cause them to choose the new product over what's existing in market. But many of them won't. And the danger is, if you don't know the difference between those things, they could give you feedback on an improvement dimension. You'll embrace that feedback, you'll use it, you'll go and make the product or service better on that dimension, and unfortunately, it makes no difference whatsoever in terms of their driving their choice of this new thing. And really, the insight around this has come from the fact, and this was research done in Harvard a number of years ago, that 90% of new innovations, new products and services fail when they get launched to market. And when I say fail, it's not that they don't work. Like as Yutong was saying in her speech a little while ago, first up, they'll develop features and benefits of that new products and services. And it's highly likely that those features and benefits will do exactly what they were designed to do. Organisations are really good at building new shit. And they'll have features and they'll deliver the benefits, and highly likely that it'll do exactly what it was designed to do. The risk is that they build this thing and nobody chooses it. And so you've improved it on dimensions that are not driving choice. And that is the essence and the biggest sort of foundational problem that this whole community, in terms of doing research and design for something new, has to solve. And the critical piece of this puzzle is to uncover what I would call the causal drivers of choice. And what I mean by that is, what actually causes somebody to choose product A over B? What causes them to do it? And if you don't know that, you're kind of, when it comes to developing a new product or service, you're kind of throwing darts at a wall, hoping that you've actually uncovered one of those dimensions in the light blue box rather than in the purple box. If you don't know what's causing them, it's largely luck as to whether you're improving it on dimensions that are going to drive people to choose it. And I say drive it because you've got their causal reasons of choice. And it's really important. If there's one thing you take away from today, it's please don't confuse causation with correlation. And it's the weirdest thing, because everybody intuitively understands this. And whenever I put this graph up, people kind of laugh and kind of everybody will look at it and go, well, of course they're different. But interestingly, organisations are very good at forgetting that difference when it comes to making decisions. And traditionally, I would argue market research has been really poor at uncovering causal drivers of choice. So typically, a lot of the research that's been done, and marketing departments or whatever going out and doing research, and what they're essentially doing is they're trying to establish correlations between customer attributes and customer behaviour. They're trying to go out there and go, well, typical customers who buy our stuff look like this, or people who have got these attributes tend to behave in this way. They're not causations, they're all correlations. And I would argue, most segmentation analysis, a lot of the kind of data analysis, if you like, that's being done traditionally by marketing departments are establishing correlations and not causations. And partly because it's hard. It's hard to go and uncover what is actually causing people to choose A over B, what's actually driving their behaviour, right? So this is a study in human behaviour. How do we actually understand what causes people to do one thing over another? Now, this guy came up with the methodology for doing this best. And it was really cool. to see Yutong earlier, and I didn't know what she was going to talk about, but it was awesome to see in her thing about, and obviously she works at Meta, and what they use is jobs to be done, which is what this guy invented. So Professor Clayton Christensen, if you don't know him, he's kind of the guru of modern innovation theory. He invented jobs to be done methodology. He invented disruption theory. So you'll all hear this word disruption, markets being disrupted, blah, 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 blah. There's an awful lot of theory that sits behind that, and that was all developed by Clayton Christensen. So his insight, and this is his last book, hence the title of my little presentation. His insight was that if people are trying to understand more about their customers, they're looking in the wrong place, which is really, again, really counterintuitive. So most organizations, if they're trying to improve their hit rate when it comes to developing new products and services and understand what customers need, they'll typically go out and try and find out more about their customers, like who are they, where do they live, what do they do, how do they behave, what do they look like, what, blah, whatever. They try and profile their customers. They develop personas that describe the typical customer who behaves. That's all about finding about the customer. Their focus is on the customer. And Clayton Christensen's insight was that's the wrong thing to do. His insight was you shouldn't be worried about the customer. You should be worried about what the customer is trying to achieve. Now, and you don't care what the customer looks like in terms of their attributes and how to define them or describe them. What you get hung up on and what you want to really focus in on is what are they trying to achieve, either in their businesses or in their lives. And it's a completely different way of thinking. But his argument is that the focus of your innovation effort should be on solving something that customers are trying to achieve, rather than be worried about the customer themselves. So he developed jobs to be done methodology. And his insight was that jobs, what he called jobs arise in people's lives, whether it's at work, whether it's in their personal lives. These things emerge in certain contexts, and what they're trying to do is they're hiring products and services into their lives to try and help them make progress with that job, right? That's why people hire. And when I say hire, I'm not talking about hire as in rent. I'm talking about they make a choice to bring that thing into their life or into their workplace. So it could be they buy it, they rent it, they borrow it, they steal it. It doesn't matter. They're making a decision to bring that thing into their lives to help them make progress with something they're trying to achieve, the job. So this whole concept is based on the idea that these people hire products and services to make progress with specific jobs to be done. And for those of you who are not familiar with it, in jobs methodology, there's 3 different buckets. There's functional jobs, so tasks that I want to complete, very, very much, functional a view of the world. There's the emotional, so how I want to feel when I hire something into my life or into my business, and social. And just to bring that to life with an example, if you think about cars, then a functional job would be, I want to get from A to B as fast or as safely as I can, or probably both. So that would be a classic functional job. It might be that I need a boot that's big enough to put my golf clubs in. I need a car that's easy to put a baby seat in. They're all very functional jobs. But there are maybe some very strong emotional jobs around how I want to feel when I'm in the car, which of course is why people like the guys who did the new Beetle, they stick a flower holder inside the car. That's solving an emotional job, right? How I want to feel when I'm in my car. And in fact, BMW and brands like that, I would argue, they've built their whole businesses on focusing on an emotional job. So the whole BMW brand is built around the driving experience. It's not around how big's the boot and how fast does the car go. Their whole brand, the whole basis of competition is that they solve this job better than any other brand does about the driving experience. And yet Toyota, when they launched the Prius, focused on solving a social job around how do I want to be seen when I'm driving my car. And hence, people like nobody would have thought that Leonardo DiCaprio would change his Ferrari for a Prius. But that was because it was about how he wanted to be seen, so social job. So there are different types of jobs that people are trying to make progress within their lives, either functional, emotional, or social. And what you're trying to do, once you've uncovered the job that they're trying to achieve when they're hiring something into their lives, you're trying to understand, is there a gap? In other words, I'm trying to get a job done. Could be functional, emotional, social. Could be a combination. And the currently available solutions in market are allowing me to make a certain amount of progress. What we're trying to understand is there a gap? So, given why they're hiring these things, how well are those existing products and services essentially helping them make progress with that job? And if the answer is not very well, there's a gap. That's that bit in the middle. It's the struggles and challenges that get in the way of progress. Progress to do what they're trying to do. And that's your opportunity to go and build something new and help them get their jobs done better. That's your dimensions of better that you need to focus your product or service development effort around. And just to give you an example, simple example, Dropbox. So before Dropbox emerged, quite a few years ago now, the job that people were trying to get done was essentially, I want to have access to my files and documents wherever they were, whenever they wanted, and on whatever device they were using at the time. So Drew Houghton, I think his name was, Houghton, never get the pronunciation right. He was, taking the bus to work every day, trying to work on his way to, when he was on the bus, and he got hugely frustrated because he could never get access to his files so he could work on whatever device he was working on. And the struggles, the gap that existed at that time was these workarounds. So people were emailing, and I don't know how many of you remember that, the pre-Dropbox days, but people emailed files to themselves. They'd stick things on a USB stick and carry that around with them. That was their solution to that problem, because the available solutions in market were doing it really, really poorly. And they developed Dropbox. So Dropbox was the solution to that problem. It was focusing on that gap. They were making product or service improvements on the dimensions to help them solve that job. Now, and I just want to leave you with a couple of slides that talk about, if you like, the strategic relevance of jobs and using that methodology. And in many ways, once you put a jobs lens on the markets and your business and where you play and who you compete against, it completely changes your perspective. So typically, organizations will, from an inside-out point of view, they'll think about who they compete against and if you like, the boundaries and scope of their products and services, largely defined by the categories in which they exist. And those categories will have been built up for decades usually, and usually defined, there's a category that produces these things. There's a car category, there's a bike category, there's a a bus category. But interestingly, all of those different categories are actually solving a job, which is how do I get from A to B? So when you bring a jobs lens, it very often helps you completely redefine a market. And I'm just going to borrow. When this was invented, categories existed around digital photography, mobile phone, Nokia's, anybody who remembers Nokia, portable music, Sony, etc., etc. Those categories were all defined, thank you. They'd existed for many years and in many ways defined people's perspectives on the markets in which they competed. Jobs came along and he took a jobs to be done perspective on this, funnily enough. And he completely destroyed all of those category boundaries. And the iPhone was the category buster that essentially merged multiple previous industries into one, a whole new category, if you like. And this example is a really cool example of what I'm talking about. So you would have thought that a Snickers and a Milky Way were essentially in the same category, right? They're bought in the same aisle in the supermarket. They've got similar ingredients, similar shape, similar price, blah, de, blah, de, blah. So most people, if you ask them about Snickers and Milky Way, they'd say, well, yeah, surely they're competing each other, right? They're in the chocolate bar category. When you look at it from a jobs lens, they're not. So a Snickers, people are actually, the job people are trying to get done and make progress with when they're buying a Snickers is about preparing for the future and getting an energy hit. And they're running out of fuel. And the things that they're competing against are not Milky Way. They're a Red Bull, a sandwich, an apple, whatever. Whereas Milky Ways are solving a completely different job. So the job that people are trying to make progress with when they hire a Milky Way into their life is about coping with the past. It's a kind of comfort food. And it's an emotional eat. It's not an energy hit at all. It's an emotional decision to go and eat a Milky Way. And so, you know, the job that they're helping them make progress with is helping them helping those people feel better about themselves. It's comfort food. So the things that they're competing with are ice cream, wine, and who knows what else. But the point being that Snickers and Milky Way are solving two completely different jobs for their customers. And once you bring a jobs lens to this thing, you realise that actually the fact that Snickers and Milky Way are next to each other in the supermarket is actually probably more of an indication that the supermarkets haven't understood that they're playing and solving different jobs as much as the manufacturers. But it's just an interesting view, and as soon as you bring that kind of jobs lens to your work and thinking about the problems that you're solving for customers, then it opens up a whole new perspective on who you're competing against and where you need to make your product better in order to make sure that people will then choose your new thing above the existing alternatives. And that's kind of where I wanted to leave it. So I think it's coffee, but anybody who's got any questions, wants to find out more, we've got some of those books, The Competing Against Luck, are downstairs. So if you're lucky enough to go in the draw and win it, you'll get one of those. But if you want to come and talk about the whole methodology, as you can see, I'll talk about this for a long time. Thanks.